welcome to another edition of Sounding Board. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, then you can also go and subscribe to us on your favourite podcast app if you just want to listen to us in a bit of audio. And likewise, if you're listening to this on a podcast, we're now on YouTube, so you can go and subscribe to us and see us in all our glory. And in fact, we've moved into a different room this evening.
So we're back to where it started.
That's true.
The first recordings, I think, were in this room.
Where the acoustics are better, because there's a bit more soft furnishings and carpet going on. Albeit in our current chairs, it does look like I'm a bit of a giant.
Well, yeah, so normally I'm in that chair and you're in a slightly lower one, so I look a little bit taller, but you've obviously had enough of that.
Yes.
So you've placed me in this...
I'm in my rightful position now.
You're on your throne and I'm on this... Well, it's very comfortable, so...
Exactly. Now, I can see you've brought some notes this week.
have.
To what is probably our final edition before Christmas.
I imagine so, but hopefully we won't. This will be a standalone episode anyway, so
yes.
it's not topical.
Well, I don't know about you. I'm kind of done now with
it. We won't even mention it.
Move on.
So I wanted to talk about, and I know you and I have talked about this a little bit in the past. I wanted to talk about Cherán, Mexico.
Oh right, okay.
I think it's Cherán. It might be Cherán. I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Right.
But it's a tiny little town in the Michoacan. I have no idea how to pronounce that, but the Michoacan region of Mexico. And to give you a bit of perspective, I mean, Mexico's not known for its safety anyway. I mean, there are areas that are fine, but it's not known as being, that whole area is not known for being that safe. This region is the most dangerous in Mexico when it comes to crime, drug cartels, corruption. The number of murders and crime in general is far greater in there than the rest of Mexico.
Okay.
And this little town is in the middle of it.
Right.
So
epicenter.
Well, maybe not the epicenter, but it wasn't. It wasn't starting off from a particularly good base. So what happened was this town, and it has a community of 20,000 people, and it had.
So it's not that big.
No, small, very small. And it had about 17,000 hectares of land around it, of forest that they'd maintained for generation after generation. What was happening was all these the forests were getting chopped down by these loggers that were just kind of coming in, decimating the forest. They didn't own this. They just kind of come down in their trucks, decimate their forest. And they had protection from drug cartels and from the police and corrupt politicians and all this kind of thing.
This is the loggers you're talking about?
Yeah, this is the illegal loggers. And in 2011, after about half of their forest had been decimated, they just had enough.
The people of Cherán.
The people of Cherán had enough. And what happened was there was a bit of an uprising, and it was started off by the women.
This is the interesting thing.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. Yeah. So there were about 20 women who got together, and you got to bear in mind these loggers had they were kind of guys in trucks with weapons, and 20 women with just like sticks and rocks and a couple of machetes.
Am I right in saying? Do we know these were actually older women? These were like kind of. Village elder type.
They were
the grannies.
They were the mums and dads and the mums and the grandmothers.
Yeah.
Armed with like a couple of machetes and sticks and a couple of rocks. Just kind of ran these. Well, they took a couple of hostages. So they took a couple of hostages, ripped them out of their trucks,
right,
tied them up, and were basically trying to run everyone else out. They eventually, the church bells were ringing, and eventually they got other people, and finally they got like a couple of hundred people in total. They kind of took the tires off the trucks and set fire to them. They barricaded the city. They ran out all the police, because all the police were corrupt. All the politicians and anyone of authority was basically run out of the village, and they didn't let the hostages go until everyone had left the village.
And then they did let them go.
And then they did, of course they let them go. So they were as violent as they needed to be to protect their own property rights.
Okay.
So they didn't harm anyone. They just, hoisted them out of trucks and tied them up for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
So these kind of 20 women managed to kind of basically kickstart this uprising that ran out crime from this tiny little town. So they eventually kind of barricaded the town. They set up their own police force effectively, which is kind of either people were taken in turns that would volunteer.
But this is no one got let back in from the old police force.
No, not at all.
They started from scratch with the types of institutions, for want of a better term, that they thought they still needed.
Yeah, so they set up their own police force, which was and that was basically just patrolling the forest to make sure they weren't coming back, and kind of border patrols, that kind of thing, to the point where you're not allowed. So nothing political is allowed in Cherán. Nothing. Right. If you tried to drive through it with your Hillary Clinton bumper sticker, you just wouldn't be let in until you ripped it off. You wouldn't be let in.
So they've got a ban on politics.
A ban on politics. So if you tried to deliver leaflets or anything, no, not at all. There's no voting there. There's no politics or anything. Now they do have their own assembly of 12 people, and I think that's split up into 4 of these like regional assemblies from different quarters, I think.
Yeah.
Each of them has 3 representatives, and it must include 1 woman.
Okay.
And then they kind of sit in this kind of grand assembly, and they just.
But we're still talking 20,000 people, so it's not
exactly, and they don't do much anyway. So they're not really. It's not
what power do they have then? Yeah.
Well, I think they just meet to discuss, if they need to police things a bit differently, or not much gets decided because everyone's allowed to make their own decisions. So I think they just meet to assess the situation and see if they need to make any changes. But they don't do too much.
And you're saying this was 2011?
This was 2011, and I've been trying to get statistics since. Now the last time I managed to get some from 2016, which said that I think 3,000 hectares have been planted since. So they've been replanting.
Okay.
And they're going about replenishing. The forest.
And what's crime like?
Crime dropped off a cliff. It literally dropped off a cliff. So it went from being, having regular murders and beheadings and all sorts to nothing. I think there was one Cherán resident has been killed, but not in Cherán. It was like
when they went to somewhere else,
and they were offed. Very little crime. Apparently, all the police do occasionally is the only thing they have to do is you get the odd like drunk teenager, and they just
clip round the ear and take them home.
Or they just lock them in the cells overnight until they sober up, and then take them home in the morning, and that's it. And they patrol the area and the forest to make sure.
But again, that's about protecting the land and the woods.
Of course. So they've had for 1,000 years or probably longer.
Yeah.
I saw an interview with a young girl who was a student. She's 18 years old. I think ultimately she wanted to be a doctor or something. She was some kind of medical student. 18 years old. And she said, yeah, it's fine. I can walk around at night on my own and I feel completely safe because there's basically no crime.
Okay, devil's advocate, is that... Obviously, I'm believing what you're saying, but could there be an element that this stuff isn't just being recorded anymore? This is we've run out all the bureaucrats and all the officials, so we just don't know whether there's any of this like crime anymore. Who's doing the counting of this stuff?
Well, I've seen.
I'm trying my hardest to come up with some counter.
I've seen interviews with residents, and nobody has a bad thing to say about this.
Yeah, so anecdotally,
everybody says there is no crime here.
Yeah.
Absolutely none whatsoever. Or virtually none whatsoever. It's gone from being, one of the worst places in Mexico to possibly one of the safest places in the world.
Now, I imagine that they're not fully self-sufficient, even as a town. I mean, they must be hooked up to the grid and.
Yeah. So there's
tax. What about?
Well, so they do. I think they do get grants.
I mean, I don't really know the Mexican national system.
Well, no. So this had to go through the courts. I mean, they ran them out, but then they went through the courts.
This is what you can imagine
to get grants and stuff. Which I think they can get grants, but I think they probably still pay. I think they probably still pay tax as well.
But you can imagine when they did this. It's the equivalent of sending the feds. It's like, wait a minute. but there obviously was some other standoff. There must have been some kind of standoff at a national level with national level authorities.
I mean, they weren't letting them in. I can tell you that they would have rather, switched the lights on and off and built their own generators. Than let them in. So they do get. I think they do get some some money from the Mexican central office, but I think they probably do pay some tax as well. So, but it's they would rather be self-sufficient. That's just
interesting. And so it's 8 years later or whatever, and they're still like this. They haven't, to your knowledge.
No. I was looking earlier today.
Politics hasn't crept in.
No. I was looking earlier today, and I couldn't find anything, and I couldn't find any updates saying anything had changed. So one of the guys who I saw, who I've been following for a while, but I must have missed this particular episode. This guy called Jeff Berwick, who has a podcast and a YouTube feed called Anacast.
Okay.
And he lives in Mexico anyway. So he's a Mexican resident because he's had enough of America and the corruption over there.
Right.
So he thought he'd go to Mexico, but in certain ways more free.
Yes.
And he's Anacast. He's Dollar Vigilante on Twitter. He's got a great podcast. But he actually went over there, so he did like a YouTube video of going over there took a film crew over and just kind of wandered around and interviewed people, and he loved it. He said it was amazing. The closest you could get to like
a libertarian utopia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's difficult to think of anywhere else on Earth that's as free as that. Even places like Liberland, you can't really actually go there yet, even though effectively, they're saying this is a libertarian paradise. You go there and you get arrested by, Serbian police or whatever, whichever side is the ones that don't like it. So there's still, you can't live there yet. Whereas Cherán,
it's an actual place,
an actual community, an actual libertarian community that exists on Earth in 2019. That is peaceful and successful, and everybo's happy. And why isn't everywhere like this?
But I agree, and actually forged from a high crime area in, as you say, Mexico. Not known for not like they're warmongers, but you just tend to think of a certain level of lawlessness, don't you?
I've been to Mexico, and but obviously I went to like the safe areas. But and it's lovely. It's fantastic. Food's amazing.
Yeah.
And everyone's really friendly. But yeah, it is known. It is known. Yeah, I wouldn't have gone out at night on my own. Put it that way. But yeah, it's crazy, and I love the way that everything is done at a community level.
Yes.
And this is another thing that I've been going on recently about how I disagree with objectivists, and I agree with most of their stuff. But the feeling I get from objectivism is that they want almost all decisions to be made by the individual, except for the ones that need to be made at an absolute high level. So they're quite happy for America to exist and all the other decisions to be made at the top of America, things like the police and the armed forces and this kind of thing. They want that to be done at a national level and as fewer countries as possible. These huge areas like America and Europe and this kind of thing. Whereas I think,
lots of small areas.
I think do it at a local level. Why would you want to stop this village that is obviously successful from organising their own police force? Why would you possibly want to do that?
How could it possibly be an efficient or good idea to try and manage a police force at a national level?
Anything at a national level.
Yes, this is central planning.
It's issues. Yeah, it's issues you have with, with healthcare and to a lesser extent the armed forces. But it's crazy.
I always I love the term best practice, and it's obviously misused an awful lot more these days, and it's the kind of term that has been co-opted by.
Well, it means common
government.
Practice a lot of the time, doesn't it?
A lot of the time it does, and it can be difficult to distinguish between the two. It isn't that there is this mystical book of best practice for any subject matter. You could go and look for it, and in fact, you've got to make judgment calls. Sometimes you've got to try things to find out whether it's best practice or not.
And you would think that it's not common practice. If best practice is what everybody does, it
can't be best.
Mediocrity.
Yes,
presumably.
Yeah. Well, I mean that's It's a difficult one, that one, isn't it? Because
that's why
can you always, if everyone does go after best practice and manages it, then is it best practice anymore? Is there something else that becomes bleeding edge at that point?
It would depend if that thing actually existed. If there was no better way of doing something like breathing, then you and I are probably doing best practice.
Best practice in breathing right now.
Unless somebody says, "Oh no, you need to breathe in this certain way," and you need to. Well, I guess there is. It's probably you need to probably hold it in for 3 seconds, and then breathe out, and So even breathing, we're just a boring common practice, aren't we? Yeah. Though I suppose the point I was making was, and as I say, the government now will talk about best practice like it's a thing that they can achieve, which I don't believe that a government department can, or an agency or whatever. Well, that goes back to your point of central planning, in that by your starting point of trying to do something at a central level is not best practice.
No,
from the beginning.
But also you can have, as soon as you break these things down into smaller units, but let them freely work out what is best practice, or talk to each other to work out what's best practice, then standards rise. And that's what happens. There's got to be a willing there, obviously, to do it, but as soon as you have a level of competition, then there becomes a necessity to do it if you don't want to lose custom and stuff like that.
But even if, I mean, you talk about competition, but
it's voluntary. That's the difference.
Yeah, and it might be that what is best practice for one region or one town isn't best practice to another. It's not a guarantee that it won't be. So let people find out for themselves what is best practice for their area.
And I wanted to come on to that because I'm using this analogy of the police force that you arrange at some kind of national level, and obviously you can break these things down into smaller and smaller units that do work together, do report in certain ways. Of a politician's say, if the policing minister was sat with us right now, they'd say, "Oh yes, but of course you have a local police force, and then part of a larger force, which is then part of a county-wide one, that's then part of this." And they'd say, "No, there is these structures. These structures exist." And I'm sure to a degree there are local decisions being made, but there's still a national edict, isn't there? And there's still stuff being done that has to then be filtered down, not least of which when the Director of Public Prosecutions says we must now treat all victims like they're telling the truth. Victims must be believed is probably the shortest way of defining that.
I mean, that is one of the scariest things that I've heard in my entire life. I mean, so innocent until proven guilty is one of the greatest things that probably Western civilization has achieved.
Yep.
Throughout history, innocent until proven
default,
guilty.
Yeah.
That is, and it's it's incredible that we've actually got there, and you don't want to put that at risk in any way at all. And that's the complete opposite. That's guilty until prove your innocence.
So who was it that said it? Who was it that directed this? Who was
that?
The Director of Public Prosecutions?
Was it like Chris
Yes,
or someone like that?
Ladies and gentlemen, it was Keir Starmer.
Okay. Oh, of course.
Who's currently working out whether he wants to throw his hat in the ring.
Incredible.
Sorry to bring it back to something topical, but it's kind of important. And I remember when he was Director of Public Prosecutions, hearing him on the Today programme or something back when I did.
He was clearly a politician all along, wasn't he?
Exactly, and it's like, one of those moments we go, you're going. I had a very similar moment for him than I did when seeing David Miliband as an MP, as a junior minister, going, you want to be leader of the Labour Party, and this is a person who wasn't even an MP thinking, you want to be the leader of the Labour Party and Prime Minister one day, and then oh look, he's running for an MP. Oh look, now he's a minister. Oh look, so he's taking the course that to me was obvious when he was DPP. But to me, that's just one of the, as you say, one of the scariest things you could introduce into any kind of system. And that's an example of something that came from the top, from the centre, that then influenced the actions of individual police officers, even though you've got, from Land's End to John O'Groats and the differences between those areas of the UK. Whereas if regions, if areas were allowed to get on with it.
But even if every single region was exactly the same and identical,
yeah,
it would still
there'll still have different people in it.
It would still, well, even if the people were basically the same. Let's just assume that everything is identical.
Sounds like some kind of communist utopia here now.
But let's just assume that they're the same. It still wouldn't make sense to have everything defined centrally, because it's just too much power. So power corrupts, and that's one of the things.
Exactly.
That was why they ran out the politicians and the police, because they were all corrupt, and they wanted to rid corruption. Power corrupts, so the more power you give anybody, the more corrupt they're going to be.
Yeah.
So just do it all at a local level.
The concept of decentralisation, in terms of the lowering of risk, is such an important concept. The network that I built for the product that I sell, I'm not the salesperson, I'm the techie, but the product that our company sells is based on a network, and the fundamental part of the network is distribution and decentralization. And when we have to build something that in some way could have an impact on the entire network, then we do it very, very, very carefully. And in fact, right now there is still nothing that we've got that can act on the entire network all at once. And it's kind of a rule because of exactly that. With the best of intentions, you can slip on the button, and so when we're building software, we can build safeguards into these things. I could build it so that you and I both have to turn a key at the same time, and all this kind of stuff. But it's better if you create autonomous, or at least semi-autonomous nodes that can make their own decisions. And our entire product is based on thousands of individual nodes making individual split-second decisions without something central to say, yes, you've got the decision right or not. And then for those smaller number of larger nodes that comprise our core network, again, every single one of them acts independently. And if we need to make a change, then we actually have to go to each one and make a change. And albeit we're writing orchestration systems for it, I am so keen to maintain that decentralization and that distribution of things. I'm going to be making sure that we write the software in such a way that it just doesn't let us make a change to everything all at once, because of the inherent risks to having that much power. So it works with systems as well as it works with anything else.
Well, of course it does. I mean, if you look at like Git, the revision software is completely distributed, and
as long as our listener
Bitcoin
and viewer understands that we're not being offensive by saying Git.
No, so Git was written by a guy. If you don't already know, it's written by a guy called Linus Torvalds, who wrote Linux software.
Yeah.
Back when he was a young lad in sort of 1991 or whatever. And so
it's a versioning software, isn't it?
Well, no. So Linux was the operating system. So
and
he named that after himself.
Yeah.
So and he got to the point where he was kind of maintaining Linux with like hundreds of developers, and all kind of revision software up until that point was pretty poor. So he thought, right, I don't want to use any of this. I'm going to write my own, version control software. So he wrote that, and they said, right, okay, what are you going to call this? So he said, well, I tend to name things after myself. The first being Linux, so this is Git. So that's why he called it Git. It's not an acronym. He said, I'm going to name this after myself, Git. It was just him having a laugh because he's a funny guy.
I seriously did not know that story.
So now every software developer around the world, whenever they push code, is Git push, Git commit. Git, they're typing the word Git in millions of times a day because he wanted to.
Because he thought of himself as a bit of a Git.
But that's completely.
I didn't know that story.
That's completely distributed. Obviously, Bitcoin and these kind of the things that are completely distributed.
Bitcoin is a great example. Well, I mean, anything based on blockchain.
Yeah, of course.
Is a great example of that.
Yeah,
and Liberland, the place they're trying to kind of got off the ground. They're trying to build systems based on blockchain for the administrative parts of the country.
Yeah. I mean, let's not get too technical. But you mentioned things like you can slip on the button and then it kind of wipes
Yeah.
out the whole thing. But aside from that, there are people who deliberately do bad things.
Yes.
Not,
I could
it's
hire
not
someone.
just
I could
mistakes.
hire
It's
someone,
not just mistakes.
and they could turn on me, and I could give them all the power. And they can do it exactly. Why would you want any one person to have all the power? Like, I don't know, a president or a prime minister or the
crazy.
chief of police.
So this is why I disagree with objectivism having like a centralised police force, because it'll just end up like American police are now.
And it's what I find interesting, because as you say, every other aspect that objectivists talk about is fantastic and totally lockstep in line with what I believe in. But the things they've left out are very specifically the forcey ones. Like, they're all about no coercion, but they're the things that have the most direct force, like a national defence and a police force. They want you to vote in. I find that odd.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of I say I kind of understand. I could almost forgive people wanting to have like a national defence force. That's one of the things I think people in general
that is centrally planned.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I don't believe that's necessary, but it's one of the last things that that people will get convinced about, because you don't often hear about military corruption and the army or the navy doing particularly bad things. They go into wars that are bad, but that's not them making the decisions. That's being stuff made at a political level. So the forces themselves.
People are with the soldiers.
Yes, they're with the squaddies. They're with the soldiers.
Okay.
But they're not with the police officers. Understandably, look at the police force in America, for example, which is just awful. So I just don't understand why people don't think that smaller or private police forces are a better idea. That just seems crazy to me. I mean, so the objectivism argument is that in order to protect you and to enforce your property rights and your freedoms, we need to have the monopoly on violence, which is just rubbish as far as I'm concerned. It's the like you said, the principles that you apply to everything else
just apply to that.
Apply more to force.
That's the bit I don't get.
Yeah,
but there
98% of objectivism is brilliant.
And there's some of
them. I know we're picking on it a little bit.
No, and I would recommend to anyone that they listen to these arguments, because actually there's some of the most articulate ways of expressing how freedom should operate, except that bit. I agree. So Cherán's good then.
Cherán is amazing. I mean, I'd love to go at some point.
Yeah.
To visit Mexico again and give it a visit.
I just can't imagine. It's a shame. I can't imagine anything like it happening here. And I suppose you do think about it when you see. I mean, London's a big place, but London knife crime and things on the rise and all this kind of stuff. Getting shot in Nottingham and.
I can't imagine Islington doing it.
No.
Or Tottenham, or Hackney.
Yeah.
Which is the Tower Hamlets, or the places that need it most, that could do with actually saying, we're going to have a politics-free zone.
What do you think it was? What do you think it was that gave them the guts to do it?
I don't know, because it was basically 20 old women who are, and they're not. I guess everyone's quite small over there. But I remember when I went over there, and I'm a big guy. I don't feel small very often. I normally feel quite tall. I felt like a giant.
Really?
In Mexico. So the guys
so
are quite
the blokes
small.
Quite small as well.
But the women are tiny. But they just got their sticks and a couple of machetes and a couple of small rocks, and just ripped these loggers out of their trucks. 20 women, and there were a few trucks, and they just kind of just blockaded the road, ripped them out, no fear.
Obviously, none of the loggers were women. Yeah.
No.
Obviously.
No.
And
I think
do you think that was the key to their success? Do you think that this was because it was the women? Just because the loggers, they weren't going to fire on the women. They weren't going to.
Could have been.
that there was something in them still, even though these were basically bad people. I mean, I'm simplifying bad people here, but that they still had something which was don't hit a woman, don't, you know, and so to a certain degree they let that happen to them because they still had this sense that they shouldn't do this to an older female. Maybe it was an age thing as well,
possibly.
But I
mean, I don't know.
I can't imagine it happening with 20 guys.
I can't.
They'd have shot them down. They'd have mowed them down, wouldn't they?
I don't know. Are loggers murderers? Would they have? I mean, they might have fired a few shots in the air, but can you, just because you're stealing wood from somewhere, does that mean that you're just going to pull a gun on anyone who tries to take it out? You might just go, okay, it's a fair cop. I've done it. Just, you know, leave me alone. Take the wood. Leave me alone.
I mean, I'm not trying to make a feminist point here, obviously, but I find
I do
cultural
find it
fascinating. Yes,
it was the women who like we're going to sort this out.
Mm.
We're going to get together and we're going to sort it out. And then of course, you know, everybody else, you know, pitched in afterwards, but they were the ones who kicked it off and sorted it out.
There's something nice about that. There's something nice about the elders and the grannies.
Yeah.
Grannies with their pitchforks drove them out. Yeah, we need that kind of. That's the kind of revolution that we need over here.
Yeah, because and then there was all they did. So they pulled them out, they tied them up, and they let them go once everyone else had left.
Never come back.
And said, never come back. And also nobody with to do with any kind of politics is allowed back. You know, if you bring anything political in here, you will get chucked out. It is a politics-free zone. What's
the largest politics-free zone do you think that we could create?
We, you and I.
Yeah.
Well, there's this area here that we're in.
If you ask my wife, then this isn't a very politics-free zone at all because I'm in it. But I'm not a politician. I'm talking about politics.
I think you can. Yeah, so you can. I think if you moaned about politics in Cherán, about how the politics everywhere else is rubbish, they wouldn't.
They'd probably be fine.
But it's still the pro politic. Yeah. You know, if you came in with a like a make America great again cap or whatever.
Make Cherán great again.
You wouldn't be allowed in. So no political symbols or anything like that. And it is now a corruption-free zone. But yeah, so we could,
corruption-free zone, brilliant.
We could if you bought the house next to me, I'm in effectively a cul-de-sac with a small cul-de-sac, which is basically my drive and my neighbour's drive.
With a shared, well, how does it work with the road?
Well, so I own the road.
Yeah.
They have a right of way. So there's an area where they can drive in, and there's another area where they can spin their car around.
Yeah.
So that's all mine, but they have a right of way.
Yeah.
So if you bought that house, we could have our own little area there. We could have proper gates in between my house or the wall around the courtyard and the garage. We could be a gated community of two houses.
I wonder what the rules are though. Like,
we have no speed limits. We could have, but this is another one of my.
But the police could still come in.
Exactly. That's what I don't like about objectivism. It's like if somebody somewhere has jurisdiction over me in my land,
is it really your land?
Presumably the police do. It's not my land. You cannot believe in property rights and objectivism. Not truly.
Well, I agree with you. So I got raided. Do you remember? Years ago?
Raided?
My house. Police came in. I wasn't there.
Oh God, that was a long time ago.
Long time ago. Well, when are we talking? 2005
15,
or 6?
It's got to be 15 years ago.
Yeah, this is my first house. So living on my own, and I get this text message or a phone call from a mate of mine, a mate of his who lived kind of opposite me, who I knew of, but he wasn't a mate. Had phoned him saying Nick needs to get back to his house right now. It's like swarming with police. Wherever I was, this was after work, so I legged it back in my car. And the police there's a couple of vans, there's guys outside, my door is open, the lock's been broken, and there's a couple of coppers sitting on my sofa. Not a nice experience. And they gave me this 20 times photocopied bit of paper. Literally, it was like not even A5. It was like A6 little scrap of paper with basically a copy of the law on it that they had used to gain entry to my property, and it was surrounding their right to enter if they think that there's a life in danger. That was the laws that they used, and it was because, oh God, didn't it go back? It went back to some American state somewhere when I spoke to them. It was all fine. This was proper mistaken identity, mistaken address, all this kind of stuff. The telephone number or something of my house had cropped up in some kidnapping trial in Kentucky or something. It was that ridiculous. Or it was like South Carolina or something.
It wasn't that a life was in danger in your house.
They thought it was.
They thought it was.
They thought this was all tracking back. They thought there was someone held hostage in my house.
Right. I mean, this
it was a life and limb.
This doesn't have to be the police. If anybody thought that the life was in danger in my house, I would be fine with them. You know, if they had a reasonable belief,
I would give them retrospective.
I would be fine with them, them breaking in, but I would expect them to be apologising when they realised that they.
And they did. Look, I can't. Other than the fact that they got it wrong, I can't fault the coppers. They were great, and it was a surreal situation. When I got back, there was no question that I wasn't a suspect in all of this. It was
they've just reached. You were a subject.
They knew this was a dead end, and then they had to clear up after themselves and apologise for it. And I got a new door paid for
by yourself.
Because they had to break the lock, and they've got a very clever device for. I didn't see it in action because I wasn't there, but when there was no answer, they then broke the lock barrel in such a way as to not really damage the door.
Right.
But they did damage the door handle and all this kind of stuff. In the end, I got a whole new door. But they were able. But the point was, they did damage the handle and the casing and everything. But they were able. By the time I got there, they'd already fitted a new lock. They were like handing me the key. Here are the new keys to your house. Surreal, utterly surreal. But yeah, the police are allowed to enter your house if they suspect. And this comes back to this idea of power again, and the abuse or misuse of that power. Because here we go. There's a law. There's the law that says you can do it in these circumstances, and you and I might even sign up to that and go, yes, you think someone's about to be murdered in my house, and not by me. Like I'm not. Then do something about it. And as you say, I'm going to actually authorise anyone if they think that. And it's about just cause, isn't it?
It's about being. It's all about reason. It's about being reasonable.
Yes.
If you have a reasonable belief that someone's life is in danger, then you need to
get a corrupt person. You get a corrupt person in that situation, and they want to steal from you. One of those coppers could have wanted to steal from me. They could have wanted to hurt me. They could have wanted whatever with stuff to intimidate me, and so they could have used it as an excuse, and I wouldn't have had a leg to stand on. And giving somebody any power over you means that there's a risk that that's going to happen. And that's the little microcosm there of the entire problem with the state, as far as I'm concerned. Because as soon as you say, it's okay, the law says this. We give the state power over us. Here. But they've got laws. There are laws stating what it should be. Well, what do you think corruption is? Corruption is people misusing the law.
Yeah, so Murray Rothbard was excellent on this. If you read the Libertarian Manifesto, it has kind of sections on.
I have been this week.
Have you? Brilliant.
Incidentally, I have been Rothbarding it up to the max this week.
Yeah, so
as soon as the election was over, I was like, there has been a vacuum to fill with content, and so I've been reading Rothbard.
Okay, so stop aging this podcast. But with so Rothbard is great on police and stuff, and I
love his examples. He's great at examples.
Yeah, and so he talks about like the law being applying to everybody. So that if there is a private police force, and if they believe someone to be to be a danger to people or whatever, and they have to be able to prove that it's reasonable. They have enough evidence.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you stick somebody in prison, that's kidnapping.
Yes.
It's great. It's great.
Well, and I thoroughly recommend anyone to read that. In fact, it's free on Google.
I think it's okay. Yeah,
I've been reading it on Google Books, and it's absolutely free. That just turned off.
Okay, so it's a good job we're recording on that one as well.
we can always use that one until we have to cut to that one.
So and I'd also, whilst you're reading these books, so there's another one. I believe this is free as well. The Machinery of Freedom by David D. Friedman.
Right. We'll put links to these things on.
That's excellent as well, because it's one of, so in a libertarian society, there'll be different ways of doing things.
Yes.
Some people can pick one way, some people can pick another way. So it's important to read different people's takes on it.
But we've got an example in Cherán where they're already trying it, because it has been tried,
and it works.
Real libertarianism has been tried.
We should start that off.
On that note, thank you very much for, I can look at this one now, listening to and watching Sounding Board on YouTube, on Google Podcasts, on iTunes, on Podbean, on Stitcher, on
Player FM,
all of these places. Thanks very much.